Hello and welcome to our presentation on priming behaviour change in motorcyclists. I'm Alex Stedmon and myself and David Mackenzie from Transport Scotland would like to tell you a little bit more about some work we're doing on designing and trialling new road markings to help riders approaching bends. The work is in collaboration with Transport Scotland, Bear Scotland and Open Road Simulation. We'd like to thank the organisers of the Festival of Road Safety for this opportunity to present our work to you. Our presentation takes about 10 minutes or so, and we hope you enjoy what we've got to tell you. If you've been lucky enough to get up to Scotland over the summer, then you may have noticed on the side of the road and on the road itself a new road sign, a new road marking system. These have been installed on a number of locations around the Highlands, and they've created quite a bit of a stir on social media because they don't appear in the highway code. They're a newly developed sign and road marking system which is undergoing trials in Scotland at the moment, but people have begun to ask questions about what they mean and who they're intended for. Earlier this year, I was able to interview car drivers and motorcyclists about this new road sign and road marking system and put to them these exact same questions of what they meant and who they were intended for. I also looked to investigate their perceptions of the marking system itself, and also issues around maybe driver distraction and rider distraction and overall user acceptance. A number of themes emerged from the interviews about the meanings of the road sign or the road marking. In general, people guessed them correctly, indicating that they should go through the gap or maybe keep within a certain pathway on the road. A number of other interpretations were made, varying from motorcycle parking, one-way or special filter access for motorcyclists, down to maybe a hazard ahead or some sort of visibility issue. A common theme across both the road sign and the road marking for car drivers or motorcyclists was that this sign seemed to be similar to the motorway chevrons that appear on roads. And these give some sort of distance warning about keeping a safe distance behind a vehicle in front, and that maybe in this case the instruction was very similar. This work forms part of a new approach to rider safety in Scotland. Motorcyclists account for only 2.2% of all vehicles registered on the roads in Scotland, but they also account for over 18% of those who are killed or seriously injured on Scottish roads. Now, this isn't a problem that's unique to Scotland. We see this pattern around the world, where motorcyclists form a disproportionately small number of road users, but also a disproportionately high number of those who are killed or seriously injured on the road. This makes motorcyclists a particularly vulnerable road user group. The Scottish Road Safety Framework that was published in 2016 identified motorcyclists as a priority focus area for 2020 and beyond. Within the Strategic Road Safety Plan, a specific action was developed to further develop and implement road safety measures specifically for motorcyclists, as well as supporting educational campaigns where appropriate. Now, we know that motorcyclists are notoriously hard to reach, and that many traditional road safety campaigns and initiatives have not always worked or reached their targeted audience. We also find that there can be limited impact because people get used to things and become habituated to the interventions that are put in place to try and help them. What we need to do is to find new ways to engage with riders, and we need innovative ways to help riders stay safe. Now, in Scotland, this has been achieved really well with an initiative called the Breathtaking Roads. What they've developed is a range of videos and other supporting materials online for riders and also for other road users to look at. But it's taken from a very unique perspective of a motorcyclist enjoying Scottish roads. If you haven't had a look already, I would really urge you to follow the link on the slide and look at some of the videos and also some of the graphics that are involved in those videos to help communicate the message of safety to motorcyclists while also enjoying the Scottish roads and the scenery. With the aim of trying to find more innovative ways to engage with riders, I was involved in some research in New Zealand where we developed the concept of primes. Prime itself stands for Perceptual Rider Information for maximising expertise or enjoyment. And the idea here is that we borrow principles from nudge psychology to help influence rider behaviour in a positive way. At the moment, we're looking to develop innovative road markings that form a toolkit for riders as they approach demanding bends. And the idea here is that with it being a toolkit, they can adapt it to different road conditions and different weather conditions, and therefore hopefully counter some of those habituation effects of more traditional roadside messaging. The key things that we're focusing on in this research are the rider's position, speed and braking as they approach a demanding bend. We know that some bends are more demanding than others, and the research tells us that left-hand bends are particularly problematic, more so than right-hand bends. And so we're looking at a range of different sites where we can implement this toolkit approach to rider safety. And I've just used the word safety for the first time really there, because the whole idea of primes is not about safety. It's about maximising expertise and enjoyment. But with that, we hopefully can communicate more effectively with riders in a language which they're more accepting of in terms of enjoyment and expertise. But also if they do that, they become safer riders and therefore reduce their accident risk. So I conducted 400 rider and driver interviews as part of this research. I attended the Motorcycle Live motorcycle show at the NEC in Birmingham in November 2019 and interviewed 200 motorcyclists there. I also went to the Autosport International event at the NEC again in January 2020 and interviewed 200 drivers there. The interview schedule you can see on the right hand side of the slide. In interview 1, I conducted a more in-depth investigation into the road sign and road marking, dealing with aspects of rider and driver perception, use factors, potential issues, and things like distraction. Also one-word summaries and one change that people would make to the current design that we had at the time. You'll also see that the order in which I showed certain information was switched over in interview 2. So the road marking itself was shown first in interview 1 and the road sign was shown second. And then in interview 2, the road sign was shown first and the road marking was shown second. This was to balance things out and to make sure that we weren't getting any undue bias in the responses for either the sign or the marking. I interviewed 100 motorcyclists in interview 1, 100 motorcyclists in interview 2, 100 drivers in interview 1 and 100 drivers in interview 2. When people were shown the road sign, we looked at the order of presentation depending on which interview schedule people had. When people were shown the road sign first, 55% of motorcyclists and 58% of drivers felt it was difficult or very difficult to understand. Of these numbers, 35% of the motorcyclists then guessed it correctly, and only 14% of drivers guessed it correctly. And this might indicate that there's perhaps an intuitive nature to the sign being developed for motorcyclists, and therefore more motorcyclists understanding it at first sight. When the road sign was shown second, so participants had been shown the road marking first, 95% of motorcyclists and car drivers rated it as easy or very easy to understand. This was a dramatic switch in terms of people's levels of understanding based purely on seeing the road marking just moments before seeing the road sign. We also looked at the road marking and its order of presentation. In a similar way, we found that when people were shown the road marking first, almost 3/4 of motorcyclists and over 2/3 of car drivers rated it as difficult or very difficult. Of those, 51% of motorcyclists then guessed it correctly, and only 26% of car drivers guessed it correctly. So a similar pattern again to what we had just seen with the road sign, and perhaps again indicating that motorcyclists had a more intuitive understanding of what was trying to be communicated to them. When the road marking was shown second, so people had already seen the road sign first, almost 80% of motorcyclists and 80% of car drivers then rated it as easy or very easy. So again, we see that sort of dramatic turnaround purely based on them seeing another aspect of the road marking or road sign system just prior to this. We also asked motorcyclists and car drivers if they thought the concept of primes was a good idea, if they thought it was useful, and whether they would use it again in the future. From the results we've got here, we can see that the majority of motorcyclists thought that the concept was a good idea, it was useful, and they would use it in the future, with no lower than 90% in any of those ratings. We see a similar pattern for car drivers, with over 90% thinking that it was a good idea and a useful concept, but only 70% said they would use it in the future. Now that's not surprising because this is primarily a motorcyclist orientated sign and road marking. But the idea that some drivers would try to use it in some way to support their driving can be seen as a positive. We're also interested in people's perceptions of how distracting the road sign or the road marking might be to other riders or drivers. We see here that in terms of the motorcyclists, the majority did not feel it would be a distraction to either riders or other drivers. And again, with the car drivers, we see that even higher numbers felt it wouldn't be a distraction to riders or car drivers. So overall, we had strong support for the idea that the marking would not be a distraction when we placed it down the road. We also asked people to give us one word or short phrase summaries of what they thought about the prime road marking. And we then thematically analysed these for positive, neutral and negative terms. We found that for the motorcyclists, 74% of the terms that were provided were positive and only 10% were negative, with 14 being neutral. And for the drivers, we see a similar pattern, with a majority of responses being positive, 18% being negative and only 12% being neutral. And the word maps on each side here illustrate the car drivers and the motorcyclist responses in terms of the proportion and results that they gave. We also asked people about any design changes that they would like to the road marking that we showed them. This was the white gateway marking that we'd used in New Zealand. People said that perhaps the colour could change, that with it being a white road marking, it might get confused with other road markings, or it might not stand out as much in low light or poor visibility. People also thought that maybe the spacing of the road markings could be changed, that the number of them might be changed, or they could even be enhanced to indicate bend severity and give people more warning about the type of bend that was approaching. Motorcyclists had particular concerns about the grip of the material that would be used to present these road markings. Traditionally, white paint is seen as a bit of an enemy to motorcyclists, and they'll do anything they can to avoid it because it doesn't offer the same traction and skid resistance as normal tarmac. So we needed to be mindful of this when we moved forward with this idea. Other issues were things like the thickness of the lines, maybe having an additional road sign, which is something that we've used as we've moved forward. And even people said, don't install them, just leave it up to the rider's own experience and expertise to try and get around the bend as safely as they can. Again, we've got some word maps here which indicate some of the changes that people felt were quite most important. Colour change, grip concerns, thicker lines, and spacing seem to be some of the key issues here. Throughout this early work, we've sought to develop a better understanding of people's perceptions of the road marking and the road sign that we want to implement. And this then provides a basis for conducting road trials of primes in Scotland. We conducted the rider and driver interviews at the earliest part of this year, and little did we know that just around the corner was the coronavirus pandemic waiting to disrupt all of our plans. It meant that we had to then rethink our approach as the lockdown ensued. And what we did then was develop an online survey to look at the design requirements and features of the road sign and road marking system. This meant that we could actually carry on with the work in some capacity, even though we couldn't get out and interact with people directly. Transport Scotland funded this work and also a pilot trial which was meant to start in March and April time. This was then postponed until the travel restrictions eased in the summer, and we were able to conduct pilot trials at a number of sites throughout the summer months. We're still doing analyses on the data for these trials, but there are some early indications that behaviour has changed as a function of installing the primes on the roads. A full report will be due out at the end of this year. Transport Scotland has also been successful in being awarded funding from the Road Safety Trust to continue this work. More trials are planned in 2021 and 2022, and this will make it the first large-scale investigation into primes of its kind anywhere in the world. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. We hope you found it informative. We wanted to give you an overview of what we've been able to achieve this year, and also an insight into some of the work behind the road sign and road marking that we are trialling at the moment, and that will continue to develop in the next year or two as we go onward with the research. If you'd like to find out anything else about the work we're doing, or indeed you'll be interested in finding out more about the results that we publish at the end of the year, then by all means contact myself or David Mackenzie at Transport Scotland, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you once again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Festival of Road Safety.